All righty, boys and girls, welcome back to another episode of the Red, White, Claret, and Blue Show with your hosts, myself, Alex Baquero, and Christopher Frankophile Condit, your American villain voices, and as always, serving up the lukewarmiest of lukewarm opinions. I didn't mean to enunciate it that much, but I think you get the gist with
that is a great
with
joke for
your
the two
love
of
of the
us.
French language and Thomas Frank, who we'll be talking about later. I'm pretty proud of myself for that one. I'm gonna take a sip of my beer because
I got it. I don't know that if anybody else, if you hadn't just explained it, I don't know that anyone else would have necessarily gotten it off the rip, but I do like it. Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like we're here to talk about we're here to talk about Tottenham, and I suppose everybody might have guessed off of that. But I feel like we've talked about your proficiency in Francais before on this pod.
Yes, I do have
Your proficiency in Francais and your love of red French wine, actually.
My love of French wine and cheese. Yes, I do all those things, and also French food. I do like French food. And yes, at one time in my life, I was a pretty good speaker and reader of French. That time has passed, and it was 25 years ago. So here we are now, and I can get by in some situations.
Speaking of now, Chris, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Alex. How are you? It's almost Halloween. My kids are excited. It's a beautiful time of year here in North Carolina. My local elections have started. Voting early starts, I think, next week. Obviously, because I'm an American, I don't vote early. I vote on election day like Americans should. That's right. But regardless of your politics, vote on election day. That's my stance on it.
Of all the weird takes that you have, go wait in extra long lines is maybe the most absurd I have ever heard you have.
Election day, not election weeks.
As resident old man, I'm shooketh.
Election day, not election weeks. Again, I don't care about your politics, and I want you to vote.
God, I thought this was going to be a PSA. Everybody go vote, participate.
Oh no, yeah, that is still true. Yes,
now I'm just lost. I think we gotta leave the politics behind. There might be a little bit of that later in the podcast. So, Chris, I'm gonna ask, what are you going as for Halloween?
Oh, I don't dress up for Halloween.
Oh, come on, you don't dress up for your kids?
I don't. No, the kids.
You don't have like a family costume?
No.
Does Bridget?
We no. We've never done a family costume. I think one year we dressed up as something for a party. But once I turned like 12, dressing up for Halloween was probably not much for me.
You didn't dress up in college?
I mean, I did, but it was just thrown together whatever
liar.
costume I had. What like I had to dress up for Halloween parties in college because I'm not going to be the guy that shows up not in a costume. But I also had.
I could see you being that guy. What? I could absolutely see you being that guy, the guy who just doesn't show up in a costume.
No, I didn't. But I also had no money, so like I had to cobble together whatever I could. So I really don't remember what I dressed up as in college. But probably something easy. I'm sure toga was a thing, at least twice. But I don't really remember at all. But yes, so I did dress up in college. But other than that, no. The kids are dressing up. They're very excited. They got their costumes like a month ago, and we will trick or treat around my neighborhood, which is like an ideal trick or treating neighborhood. You can absolutely crush it with candy here. Yeah. What about you? Are you dressing up?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we dress up most years. I mean, through college, we've been Teletubby.
Oh, I've seen the photos. That's why.
Yeah, you've seen the Teletubby. There was one year, me and a friend of mine. This was when I was peak boxing, so shredded. We went as a skier and snowboarder, but all we wore were our respective boots, compression shorts, which we took the fake spider web and kind of wrapped it around as snow. And that was our outfit for the evening. I think we put a beanie on, maybe some goggles. This year, as you know, my wife is pregnant. So we are going. She is going as a 50s housewife. I am going as the milkman, and then we've got to make our dogs the cows.
That's pretty good. That's pretty
Yeah.
good. I was gonna ask if she was gonna go as an oven, like bun in the oven sort of thing, and you could have
Yeah,
been.
there were a lot of those that we saw.
Yeah.
There was one where the woman is Prego and the guy goes as chef, like Prego the sauce.
Yeah.
There was another one where you are a pregnant nun and a dirty priest. I liked that one as a Jew. What else? What else was there? There was one more really good one, but I can't remember what it was. So
Yeah.
oh, another wholesome one is for her to go as Winnie the Pooh and the guy to go as like Christopher Robin or something, because like the Pooh belly kind of fits. But
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
that,
I
that,
like
that
I like ours. I think it's funny, and I want
that's
to
a good
see how
one. Yeah.
my
Yeah.
neighbors
That's
get
a
it.
good one. Yeah. This year, Walter's a police officer and Olive's a princess, unless Walter changes his costume, because that can happen. He's got multiple options. Not that we purchased this
A
year.
couple costumes in
Not
reserve.
that we purchased this year. He's vacillated maybe to going as the Flash, which he just has a cape and a mask. And I said, well, if you're good with that, then yes.
You like the Flash?
What's that?
I said we like the Flash.
Yeah, I just if you think I'm buying you another costume, you got another thing coming, kid. You can use what we got here. But so yeah, we'll they'll go have candy, and I'll do what I normally do and sit at the end of my driveway and hand out candy to the children and alcohol to the adults. Except don't
Attaboy.
tell the police that. Yeah, but
Attaboy.
Yep. So that's where we are. How do we get on this subject? We're here to talk about Spurs.
Yeah. So that's 2 weeks away. Let's talk about this Sunday first. We are in London at Tottenham, 9 a.m. Eastern time, Sunday morning. And Chris, this is probably the research that I've been most intrigued by as I've gone into it. I will full disclosure say I've seen about maybe a match and a half of Tottenham so far this year. So I was able to kind of actually go in with a clear-eyed view, just kind of see where the data took me. And I guess let's start with the team that they're going to be putting out there. So a handful of fairly big sizable transfers. Kudus, Kolo Muani, Javi Simons. And I would say that overall it's kind of been a mixed bag on their impact so far. So Kudus has been arguably their best player so far this season. A great buy from West Ham and actually ranked as their best player per who scored. João Palhinha in from Bayern is their fourth best. Javi Simons, who I personally love, thought he was excellent in the last Euros, has not been as great yet. I think he's like about their 9th or 10th rated on who scored it, and that's manifested in the performances and the match reviews that you read. There are some where he's great, he's got a couple great moments, and then seems to go missing for a while. And no appearances yet for Kolo Muani, who's been injured. Biggest addition, Thomas Frank, new manager. We'll talk about him and the style a little bit coming over from Brentford, but I think early returns are good. I think the biggest thing that we have going into this game is that Spurs already carry over from the Angiers, ton of injuries. James Maddison out, Kulusevski still recovering from the injury last year, but still injured. Dominic Solanke already out injured. Radu Dragozin, center back, out injured. Yves Bissouma, defensive midfielder, out injured. As I just mentioned, Kolo Muani has been out injured since they got him. Supposedly, he's trained a couple times and should be ready to play on Sunday, but I doubt he's going to start. Richarlison has been great for them so far.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. What do you make of these people that they've brought in kind of this revamped lineup under Thomas Frank?
Yeah. So, I mean, both of us, I think, like Thomas Frank as a manager and have for a while. I especially have. We all know that the Church of Ange collapsed last year, and that is currently just in a sinkhole.
I was about to say, despite maybe a brief hint that it was going to get rebuilt. Oh my God, it's like the church collapsed and then someone flew by and dropped a bomb on it and just exploded it.
Yeah.
And then we needed to like light the last little bits on fire into just ashes. I mean, that is disintegrated.
Yeah, it's not great. And but anyway, so I think what you see here is very much a roster or a squad that's built with two different managers in 2 years time, because you still have a lot of holdovers from the Angiers, and you see Frank trying to put his stamp on the club, but that's often difficult to do in the span of one transfer window. But I I loved the Kudus buy when they made it, because I've always liked him as a player with West Ham, and he's been an impactful player. I think Richarlison is playing well based on the little bit of uh, game that I've seen, and
I think
then
he's got 2 man of the matches already.
the data
Richarlison.
that I looked at here to prepare for the podcast. So one of the things with Spurs last year, and actually going back in the post Kane era, is where the goal is going to come from up top, and it seems like they've kind of got that answered, especially if they can get Solanke healthy, because he looked bright in spots last year. So I like the lineup. They have a lot of players that are a threat. I think that it's going to be an interesting tactical matchup with Aston Villa and Unai Emery, and I think that now is going to be a good test for Villa to kind of see if this uptick in play or in form is going to continue against what looks to be pretty decent competition on the road. That's, I think, the thing for me that stands out.
Is it decent competition though, Chris?
You
I
don't think it
mean,
is? All right, so that's
well,
yeah.
so let's look at the numbers. So yes, they sit third. Flying start for a team that neither you nor I really thought would be competing for the Champions League places this year. So like already off to a great start. A hat tip to them. But when you look at the underlying numbers, they've already outperformed their expected goals by 6. They've scored 13. They were expected to score 7. And they've outperformed their expected goals against by an additional 4. So I think they've conceded 5 when it was supposed to be like close to 9 or something like that. Meaning they should be at a negative 1.4 goal differential or expected goal differential. They're actually at +8. That's a 9-goal swing. That's insane over, what has it been, 7 games? That's crazy.
Yeah, no,
So,
I knew you were going to bring up those stats, not just because they were in the rundown, right? But and you're right, like that
and
is true.
well,
But
let me say, like we've said this before, you expect good teams to outperform their expected goals to a degree, right? Good finishers finish chances that mediocre finishes don't, and that's kind of what the expected goal model is trying to ascertain. But I don't think we've got a large sample size for Richarlison, Mohamed Kudus, all these attackers that they have, and they're good players. Don't get me wrong; they're not +6 expected goal conversion good players. So I'm expecting at some point some regression to the mean for Tottenham, especially because they they did beat Man City, but other than that, I wouldn't necessarily say that they have much of a signature win. They beat Burnley, who I think is everybody's pick to finish 20th at this point. West Ham, when they went down a man, I don't think anybody thinks that highly of them. And yet their other results, they only beat Leeds 2-1. They drew Wolves 1-1, a 2-2 versus Brighton, a 1-0 loss versus Bournemouth, a 2-2 draw versus Bodo Glimt in the Champions League. You know, it's not
in that incredible ground.
in that incredible ground.
Yeah.
But it's not, I guess my point is, you know, I think they're outperforming against pretty poor opposition. And, you know, I'm seeing enough here to say that this is not a team that's performing like someone who's going to challenge for third place by the end of the year.
Okay.
I guess is kind of where I'm netting out.
That's fair. But I do, like, I think that the overperformance will come back some, you know. I would expect it to be closer to the mean than where they are now, and I think anybody would, because you're not gonna stay at that sort of, +6 over XG after 7 games. That's not going to happen over the course of a season. You're not going to be, plus
Can you imagine a
38.
plus 30
Right.
over at the end of the year?
So like that clearly won't happen, and I understand that. The threat, I think, from an Aston Villa perspective specifically, is that what do we always say is the biggest problem with Villa defensively? When they give up chances, they're big ones, right?
Mhm.
So that could lead to goals against potentially, or at least big opportunities for goals. With a team that's finishing well, you would expect them to finish. So I think if you're looking at this specifically as a matchup between these two teams, that's why it may potentially favor Spurs given the two teams' form. Villa is playing better. Villa are playing better than they started the season. There's no doubt about that. But I think if you looked at the early season schedule, this was the first game where you said, okay, this is a real test. And Villa have not done well up to this point against teams that they should have beaten. And it's still a Big Six club in London on the road. I want to see Villa play well, but I do have concerns defensively in particular, and we'll talk more about that as we get into it.
Being in London might actually be a benefit to Villa with how great
That's
Unai
true, though. I
Emery
forgot
is.
that Unai Emery
Yeah,
is like he's
Mr. London.
unbelievable in London.
So
Yeah.
let's talk about maybe the contrasting styles of play a little bit. And we've done a little bit of research into Thomas Frank and how his system may have adapted from Brentford to Spurs. And he's changed. He's adapted pretty well. He's realized that he's got better players, bigger budget, all that kind of stuff. And so he has changed his system a little bit. And so I guess, as Spurs come back to earth, you probably also need to think there's going to be an uptick in performance as they kind of get more accustomed to what he's asking them to do. You probably remember Brentford played 3 at the back a lot, or 5 in a lot of instances. Low block, kind of press hard when they jump across the midline, and then try to attack quickly the other way. There's elements of that have carried through. You can clearly see that this is a Frank system, but major changes that I noticed, Chris, playing more of a 4-3-3 as opposed to the 5-3-2 or the 5-2-2-1, however you want to call it, that he did at Brentford. They play with a lot of width. No surprise with Kudus being their best player so far. They finish their chances. They cross the ball a lot and they dominate possession. So Brentford was not used to playing with the ball as much, but you see this with Spurs, particularly at home. They're having 60% plus of the ball in their matchup. So definitely don't expect Villa to see a lot of it. They do get caught offside a lot and are prone to some individual errors, not great in the air. So there could be some areas there for Villa to attack. But the last thing that I'll kind of say is they seem to be a bit more savvy than Brentford in terms of when they press. And I think that they have the ability to do this because they're used to having so much of the ball. But whereas Brentford probably had a little bit more of a relentless, maybe even you could describe like a haphazard press. When you look at the numbers of the presses per possession, Spurs are a little bit lower, which makes me think that they're kind of choosing their spots and trying to really keep the opposition contained with their defense as opposed to trying to create turnovers high up the pitch, which to me says that there's going to be less opportunity for Villa to try and play through somebody over the top around and kind of get those quick breaks that we know that Unai Emery likes to try and create.
I think that's a really great point. The one thing I want to highlight there, or great points, I should say. One thing I want to highlight there is, are you saying that a manager has adjusted his playing style due to the players on his roster?
It's a shock. Something Villa is very unaccustomed to, isn't it?
And well, I was going to make a Ruben Amorim joke there, but has anybody told anybody else that you can do this? Like, you can change based on the personnel. Yeah, I think that is one of the reasons that. Well, I mean, it's new to me now, but it's another reason, I should say, to admire the way Thomas Frank goes about things, because to take a look and see, all right, what style suits my players and how can I incorporate the tendencies I like my teams to play with in a way that highlights their best attributes is great management. So and I remember when you and I talked about his move in the first place, one of the things that we discussed, and I said specifically, was, is this job a bridge too far for him? Was a club
Sure.
like Brentford his level? And I mean, early returns so far look like I am the fool. We'll see if that lasts, but it's encouraging for him. And like I said, I think you have to admire a manager when he's willing to tweak his own system to benefit his players, which ultimately benefits him. But again, I had to get the Amarim joke in there because I can't not make fun of United at least once a week. But so I think tactically, a lot of the things you brought up bring are what I am most interested in watching, because what Villa is going to do more than likely, right? It's going to be a 4-3-3 or some version of a 4-3-3. They're going to have to stay wide to defend, but also stay wide and try and create chances, like we've always talked about on this podcast for the last 10 weeks, it feels like. So I'm the matchup I'm most interested is down that left-hand side for Spurs, Villa's defensive right with Matty Cash. So I think that's where Spurs like to attack most. And I think that you're going to see, in terms of Aston Villa's ability to defend, as Matty Cash goes, that's how this game is going to go. If Cash plays well, Villa are going to have a chance to at least get a point out of this and potentially win. If Cash has a stinker, it's going to be a tough go.
Yeah, it's funny that you point that out, I suppose, defensively. I'm actually looking the other way offensively. Spurs attack heavily down the wings. Pedro Porro is a fullback who really likes to get forward. I would almost put him in that kind of like auxiliary winger fullback kind of stage. So if you think that Morgan Rogers is going to start out left there again, whether he continues any sort of upward trajectory or whether he can combine with whoever the left back is over there to kind of take advantage of Porro's aggressiveness, that's probably where I see Villa getting the most joy. The other is, you look at Spurs being a team who's not great in the air, winning their aerial duels, and then you look at their goalkeeper in Vicario, a goalkeeper who is almost unconscionably weak in the box. It's a couple years now where you put someone in his vicinity, he's flopping all over the place and can't seem to get around him. So I'm looking at this as an Austin McPhee game and seeing if Villa can use some of their aerial superiority. Maybe this is one where Tyrone Mings starts so that he can get on the end of a corner or something like that. That being potentially Villa's best option or best opportunity to score some goals and get ahead here.
That was something that I had thought about. I like what you pointed out about Vicario, and what I'm going to say, given Vicario's weakness in the box, is Villa's focus in attack should be about creating chances. They don't have to be great chances necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Just get him moving and make him do something in the box.
Put someone around him.
Yeah,
make him think.
That just make him uncomfortable. So that, and I do expect, and we'll get more into lineups later, but I do expect Rodgers is going to be out left again. When you hear my lineup, you'll hear why. But I think that which team is able to impose their style of play, because you have two managers that both want to control possession. Which team can do that, and which team can control possession and the midfield is going to probably win this game. The question is, who does it? I like the way Villa's midfield stacks up, especially if Morgan Rogers can play well like he did in England, or with England again. If we can get international Morgan Rogers, I'm on board. If we get the first 4 games, Morgan Rogers, I'm less confident, but I like the matchup there, particularly with Maddison out on the attacking side for Spurs. I think that Villa have a chance to really impose their will in the midfield, and I think we'll know in the first 30 minutes or so which way the game is going to go, or at least which team looks like they're going to be able to do what they want in attack, in possession.
So what do you how do you see this shaping up with lineup and potentially tactically?
So I actually, when I looked at this, I went back to
Actually, sorry,
go ahead.
before you do, why
No.
don't I give a quick injury update based
Oh yeah.
on premierinjuries.com, since that's going to impact everything.
Yeah, go ahead.
Basically, everyone is potentially going to return on Sunday. So that's Tyrone Mings, that's Emi Buendia, that's Garcia, Ali Watkins, and Yuri Tielemans as well. They're all supposedly pushing for contention. Obviously, we haven't had Unai Emery's injury update yet. So, make what you will about their potential availability for these.
Yeah, and based on that, I don't think any of those guys are going to walk back in and start necessarily. I actually had the exact same lineup as the Burnley game with an asterisk that it may be Mings instead of Kansa. I'm sorry, Mings instead of Pau if he's available because of the aerial superiority that you mentioned. And I think rather than going with Mullen, I'm sorry, not Mullen. Geez, Matson. Pardon me. Instead of going with Matson, he's going to stick with Luka Dean. Unai's going to stick with Luka Dean because, like I've said before, he's the security blanket on the left. And given how much Spurs like to attack down the wings, I think Unai Emery's going to want that additional security there. And Bogart, I think right now, you feel comfortable with him out there instead of Tielemans, and Tielemans coming in as a substitute to get some minutes coming off the injury. But everybody else, I think, stays the same. I think it's going to be McGinn, Rogers, Malen, and obviously Kamara is the other one in there, at the defensive midfield spot, and Ollie Watkins up top. I think, particularly with the way Malen played in his last game, Malen has almost made it so that you have to start him. Whether or not Unai Emery does is a different question, but for me, he's must start. So I'd be shocked if he's not out there, and watch me look like an idiot again and when he's sitting on the bench come Sunday. But so I think the exact same lineup as Burnley, which, just to go through it, was Martinez, Cash, Konsa, Pau, Luka Dean, Bogart, Kamara, McGinn, Rogers, Malen, or McGinn, Malen, Rogers, as it actually worked out, and then Watkins up top. The one asterisk, like I said, is that Tyrone Mings may get the start due to Tottenham's weakness in the air. What do you see, Alex?
Yeah, this is a tough one because I think Powell plays the offside trap better than Tyrone Mings does. So it's kind of like, it's funny to flip them this way because we typically talk about Tyrone Mings as the better defensive center back and Powell as the better offensive center back. But it almost feels like a reverse for this game, in that you put Tyrone Mings in for his offensive aerial ability, and you would put Powell in because Spurs get caught offside a lot, and Powell runs the offside trap a little bit better than Tyrone Mings. So, that's an interesting selection for Unai Emery to make. The other one is, how recovered is Ollie Watkins from his injury over the international break with England? So if he doesn't, does Evan Gasson come in and play up top? I would not put Daniel Malen as the sole 9, just because, for all the reasons we talked about in our last podcast, and everybody can go back and listen to that. I think he's so much more effective coming off the wing in sort of that right forward second striker, not quite number 10 role, that I feel like to put him as the lone striker number 10 would be neutering the benefit that I think he provides you. So I'm going to assume that Ollie Watkins is not going to play a part, and say that Evan Gasson is going to start up top. I think you're right with the rest of the lineup. I think it gives us balance, and it means that attacking wise, with Bogart dropping into the back line and kind of creating the 5, you have 5 across to manage those attacks down the wing. So I think it gives you good balance defensively. And then, yeah, we'll see if Tyrone Mings is healthy, and how Unai Emery makes that decision. But I think at this point, you've won 4 on the spin. You probably had your best looking game of the year. opposition aside before the break, I think you ride that and, see what that can still do for you. So I think that's basically how Villa will perform. I expect Spurs to probably have more of the possession. I would guess between 55 to 60%. So Villa are going to need to stay compact, be a little defensive, and they'll basically try and, execute that counter press and then counterattack quickly down the wings. TBD if they're able to really do that, given how Spurs play. They'll need to be disciplined if they want to kind of keep Villa at bay. And if they do, we have yet to see Villa be able to truly break someone down. So that'll be an interesting test for them.
What do you think for a scoreline then, given all that we've talked about?
All of that, I'm not as high on Spurs as their position in the league table would predict. I'm also probably not as high on Villa as most of our fan bases are, despite the 4-game win streak. So, I gotta be lukewarm on both fronts, and I think I'm gonna say a 1-1 draw.
You're like those two guys in the Muppets, Statler and Waldorf. Just everything sucks. I think that though I do think you're right that that Spurs are probably not as good as their league position looks. In Villa, like, yes, we've got 4 wins on the spin, 4 wins on the trot, all that fun stuff. Not the best performances, really. And like I said, this was a game that you kind of said this is probably the first real test against a decent squad and a very good manager. I have 1-1 as well, a draw, and I'll take the point away. I'd be thrilled with a win though, and I don't think that a win is impossible. But I'm very interested to see how the team looks, both teams actually, but specifically looking at Villa, since this is an Aston Villa podcast. I'm interested to know see how Villa plays coming out of the international break. Because again, you saw Watkins played well before he got injured in international play. Rodgers played well. Konsa had an assist. So it was like all Villa all the time when they were playing with England. So I want that level of play to continue for the club.
Agreed. Honestly, I think that's a great place to end it. Chris, the only other thing that we were going to talk about today is the decision from UEFA that came down earlier today, I believe, that Maccabi Tel Aviv will not be allowed to have fans travel to Birmingham for their upcoming Europa League match against Villa. I have some thoughts on it. I want to hear yours first. What I will caveat to everyone is we are not political scientists.
Correct.
We are not going to present our opinions on the Israel-Palestinian conflict or anything that's going on in Gaza. Leave that to the diplomats and the governments. We are only here to talk about the football aspects of it. So, Chris, with that, I cede the floor to you.
Yeah, I was a little surprised by the decision, and I know that there was a lot of noise over there about potential safety issues and all those things with the traveling fans for this game. The reason I was surprised was Blues fans are allowed in the ground, and if you can control that safely, because that rivalry and that derby is as intense as it gets in England. If you think that is safe, then then this must be a real threat for the UEFA and the SAG to come off and say not safe enough to allow traveling fans. The one thing that I want to say and want to point out is that this was not an Aston Villa decision. This decision was made, or at least the recommendation was made, by SAG and by UEFA. And Villa are going along with it. It's a tricky situation from the political standpoint, and we're going to stay out of that. I was surprised because the only other time that we've really seen this happen at Villa Park in recent memory, I'm sure there's times where it's happened before that I'm not aware of, but recent memory was the Legia Warsaw game, and that was because their fans were totally out of control, and and there were 10,000 fans there for 6,000 seats and all that sort of stuff. So and by the way, that ended with Legia Warsaw fans trying to get into the ground, and throwing things at Villa fans and all that. So I think that this was a surprising decision for me from a purely football perspective. And I'm going to leave it there, because from a purely football perspective, the decision doesn't make sense to me. From a geopolitical perspective, there's a whole different ball of wax. And obviously that is being taken into account by these groups that are making these decisions. I just was surprised that this was the one that was circled. And I'm tap dancing around as much as I can without saying too much either way, because I don't want to be in that arena.
So you're right. This is a tough one to commentate on. We are here to provide our opinion, so I guess we'll do that in the most lukewarmest way possible. I admit I actually haven't done a ton of research into the more recent games between Israeli teams and other European powers. I think they just played in Italy before the international break, and there was a dramatically increased security presence around that match as well. Maybe something happened, and if something happened and that is tied to the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans, then sure, like Legia Warsaw, if you are a fan base, irrespective of where you're from, that incites violence, that incites other things that we wouldn't endorse on this podcast, racism, whatever, like absolutely, you should not be allowed to travel. Your team should be punished that way. As far as I'm aware, this is not because of a belief that their fans are inciting violence or causing violence. It is because of a belief that the home fans in Italy, in Birmingham, and all these other areas will do violence unto the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans. That's my reading of it. If I'm incorrect, I will hold my hand up and say I misread the situation and didn't understand it. And if that's the case, that really concerns me, because then anytime in Europe fan base doesn't want to allow opposing fans to travel there, they could just make a bunch of open threats about how unsafe the fans will be when they come. And then like, what what is the Pandora's box that we've kind of opened here, especially when, at least right now, there is no kind of conflict that you can point back to going on in the region. They agreed to a peace deal. So yeah, I'm skeptical. I frankly don't love the decision by UEFA. I don't like the reflection that it makes on Birmingham, that it would be an unsafe place for opposing fans of any nationality, creed, religion, whatever. That just it really doesn't sit right with me. If you're going to kick them out of the competition, kick them out of the effing competition. But like, if they're in the competition, then they should be allowed to participate fully. So yeah, I guess that's where I'll leave it, without, as you said, without dipping too far into some stuff that we are not educated enough to speak on.
No, man, just dumb guys talking soccer here. That's all we got. That's what this brand is, or at least one dumb guy. One of us went to Penn.
That's what our webinar is going to be on. The one that uses words that maybe half our audience doesn't often understand.
I like to think that people think I went to Penn.
The one that said "do violence unto someone else."
That's fair. Yeah, no, I didn't say that.
Yeah, no, you didn't. All right, Chris. Well, after that dark subject, shouts out to Roger 4437. Thanks for sticking around, man. Appreciate your comment, appreciate the support, and obviously continue to slide tackle into those DMs, into those comment sections, and we'll respond to everything. So yeah, send us your thoughts. Happy to engage. Chris, anything else to
We
add
will not
on?
be engaging on that topic, by the way. That's
Not on that
that's
topic. Yeah,
it.
you ask us anything political, we will not respond. But
Yeah.
anything about Villa, we're in the mix.
Yeah.
I guess programming. So we obviously play Sunday. We'll probably be back Sunday night, Monday night with our recap of the Spurs game and our preview of our next foray into Europe. But until then, Chris, my dear friend, as always, up the Villa.
Up the Villa.
Hi, Mom and Dad.